Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into us today here. It's been an exciting week in the world with two amazing COVID vaccine candidates, which are based on new messenger RNA technology, never before tried. And we've got a new crew of 4 people that are up at the ISS, thanks to a private partnership between SpaceX and NASA. My name is Manish Arya. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Tavant. And again, thank you again for tuning into us to this webinar today. Our theme is driving business outcomes with data. We'll have a bigger focus in particular on developing products that monetize your data assets. We in our businesses use information from other sources all the time. It could be information about consumers or other businesses, properties, investments, drug development, crops for precision agriculture. We're making credit decisions with these, investment decisions, marketing optimization, medical treatment improvements. So we're going to hear about all this through the eyes of Experian. And while some of you use Experian products, I think even if you don't, you can gain insights into how you might improve your own product development plans. Maybe there are new ways of packaging these products, or perhaps you're sitting on some data assets that you're not monetizing today. How does Tavant fit into all of this? Well, we are a software development partner to Experian. We work on some of their data and analytics products. We also work on some of their platforms that power the business and consumer credit bureaus that we know Experian for. And we're also a distribution partner for some of their products through something called Tavant FinConnect. So without further delay, I'd love to introduce our special guest today. Her name is Alpa Lally. She is the VP of the data business at Experian in the division called Consumer Information Services. This is Experian's core business in North America. It is the one that houses our consumer credit profiles. She is responsible for product management on Experian's core and alternative data assets. And this includes credit scoring models and tools as well. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today, Alpa. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Manish. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
All right, thanks. And let's start out with some questions about trends. So what emerging market trends do you see related to data and analytics?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So in addition to traditional credit data that we leverage today, or many of our lenders leverage today to identify consumers that can really fulfill their financial obligations and ensure that they have right access to credit. A lot of the trends that we're starting to see is around how do we drive broader inclusion and diversity, right? So as I think about that, I think about products related to our, consumers providing their data, or so consumer permission data, right? So a great example of that is solutions like Boost, right? Where we actually put consumers in the driver's seat to allow them to add utility, telco, streaming services to their core credit report, right? That's a really big, massive trend that's taking off significantly. We have over 5 million consumers that have boosted over the past year. But that's really important because it's not only, again, putting the consumer in the driver's seat, but it really drives financial inclusion, right? There is, millions and millions of consumers that don't have access to credit or need better access to credit, right? So what better than allowing them to add this type of data or trade line data, what we refer to, into their core credit report so they can participate in the ecosystem, they can get better rates and offers from lenders. Another big trend that we're starting to see also is around identity, right? So the more you know about your consumer, right, the ability to effectively link all these assets together, right? It's very disparate, right? If you think about just fraud alone when it comes to identity, right? Synthetic identity fraud is one of the biggest, fastest financial crimes that continues to grow year over year, right? But part of the challenge is there's no tagged fraud asset out there that really identifies synthetic identity. So how do you string all of these different data assets related to identity together to understand whether this is, who they say they are? Is it really Alpa? Is it really Manish, right? So those are some of the bigger trends. Another big trend around data and analytics that we see quite often is the freshness of data, right? Given the current climate, right, it's changing, it's unknown and unfamiliar to every single consumer and industry out there, right? Just given the current aspects that are hitting all of us. And so the more fresher data, the dailier updates, the near real time that you can provide, it really gives lenders and the ability to assess the right insights and provide the right opportunities for consumers.
Well, that's great to hear. And it's especially awesome to see the focus on inclusion because, as you mentioned, we have a lot of people who could benefit from improved credit ratings and access to capital. And in many cases, they've been very dependable on how they paid utility bills and so on, but it's just not been a factor in the past in allowing them to access credit. Great to see. Do you also see, Alpa, different market segments using your analytics products in different ways? Are there changes in how they're working with your tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So alternative data, and I should probably caveat that when we refer to alternative, or traditionally when I refer to alternative data, I mean by data that is FCRA compliant, it's displayable, it's disputable to the consumer, right? So these are decisions or data assets that can be leveraged in a decisioning process, right? And what we've started to see actually universally is this type of data be leveraged across many industries, right? So not just your traditional financial services and your larger mid-tier and smaller FIs, but across multiple industries, automotive and health, right? It really draws a lot of insight into how your consumer is participating again in that financial ecosystem, right? So we're seeing a lot of uptick in that area. I think some of the other capabilities like our Ascend technology platform, right, which was traditionally leveraged by our larger FIs, right, our analytical sandbox, where we have the ability to put 18 years of depersonalized data, credit data, alternative data, automotive data, and combine that with any other data asset into an environment for our clients to kind of draw insights, create models, do benchmarking, peer assessments, things like that. We're starting to see different uses of that across the different segments of our clients, right? So, larger shops, right? Larger FIs generally have a lot of tools. They have the larger teams or resources, analytical resources available. And so in those situations, we're generally starting to send our data over, and then, they have their own environments where they're running their models and scores. Whereas some of the smaller FIs, credit unions, they may not have the resources and all the tools. So we're taking on those hosted capabilities for them, also providing managed services, right? So looking from that aspect of, how can we provide those services that they may need to draw more of those insights. So we're seeing a good spectrum of how our products are being used differently across those client sets. And then, I hit on this a couple minutes ago with Boost. It's like, from a consumer perspective, the fact that consumers are just willing to give permission to access their data and contribute their data, it really drives, right, a lot of adoption of, analytical products and how these capabilities can be used, again, across the different segments.
Oh, that's great to hear. I mean, I think there's, like you said, you've had to adapt to providing products that help industries of all types, right? And as well as clients of all sizes. And it's great to have that suite there. So before we move on to the next topic, I'd just like to remind everybody in our audience, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box in Zoom. We're going to spend about a total of 30 minutes in this first part, and then we'll get to the Q&A afterwards. All right. So now with the pandemic, this is obviously a topic fresh in everyone's mind still. It's hurt some businesses, it's helped some businesses. How has it actually helped your growth at Experian? How has this economic climate actually been helpful?
Yeah, great. So we know that as you just alluded to, every American is facing very unique COVID-19 related circumstances, right? The reality is there is no one size fits all solutions. Our mantra, or what we encourage, obviously, all of our lenders, is to take more of a surgical approach, I'll say, right, to consumer and small business lending, right? You can't take that peanut butter spread and adjust your credit criteria in the same manner across the board, right? Consumers are experiencing different things, right? Whether it's health related, job related. And so improving really financial access for consumers and empowering lenders to make these informed decisions is obviously a top priority. But really, to address your question of how, this situation has helped us, is we've actually have, new solutions that we're bringing to market. So really accelerating a lot of the innovations that we've already been working on and bringing new ones to our clients, but also leveraging existing solutions, right? So a great example is, our recent launch of our economic response and recovery suite of solutions, right? This is a set of attributes where we have highlighted or focused in on collecting the right attributes to help understand the consumer, right? And so let me give you an example of that. An example of that is where, a consumer, 20% of the population right now is probably in some type of forbearance or deferment, right? Given their current situation, maybe they've lost their job. But what we do want to do is understand how that consumer is still performing, right? Are they paying some of their debt down? Are they paying their balances on their credit card, right? So when you ask about the question, has it helped our growth? It's actually, how have we helped our lenders, right? Because we can help draw those additional insights into, I may be in a forbearance on a student loan, but I'm still employed, luckily, and I'm still making payments on my student loan. Those are really good insights, because as a lender, I may be more willing to, change my credit strategy or credit approach with Alpa, right? But alongside of that, we're also adding additional products and services, right? So as I think about, solutions like Ultra FICO, right? Looking at cash flow attributes, right? So not only looking at this traditional set of economic response and recovery attributes to understand how Alpa is performing on certain types of loans as she's making her payments, but also layering other solutions like, what does her cash flow look like? Is she have regular cash coming into her account, right? How does that influence? And so it's actually ultimately helping consumers and helping our lenders better understand them so that they can customize and tailor those needs to make sure, again, that they have that right access to credit, they're having the right type of favorable terms, the right type of offer sitting in front of them, so they can sustain during this very, very difficult and uncertain time for all of us.
Well, that's great. I mean, it looks like new offerings as well as changes to what you have. Was it challenging to make such a quick shift in your product plans in the last few months, or the last few quarters, I should say?
Yeah, I think the benefit is Experian is very agile, very nimble, right? We have the right technologies, the right skill sets, the right people, right? From a people, process, and technology perspective, right? So it's a matter of, the ability to react when your clients are having to react and consumers are having to react to these crazy, crazy, crazy times for all of us, right? And so is it challenging? Yeah, there's always a little bit of challenge, but it's how nimble and agile are you? And we are quite, as an organization, very nimble and agile, and products and solutions like our Ascend technology platform, right, is a great way and capability of, how we can deliver quick services back to our clients, how they can draw insights immediately. I referenced a couple minutes ago, this environment, or sandbox environment, has 18 years of depersonalized data, right? And clients can add their additional data. We can host it, with them. They can host it on our side. We can offer managed services. That's the flexibility that we have. So we can make those quick pivots to react to, the environment that we're all encountering right now.
No, that's great. And I think lots of our businesses have been adapting and learning through this. And it's great to see that you've been able to innovate in this climate. Do you think that these changes and these new innovations are going to be applicable even after this economic crisis is behind us?
Absolutely. If I think about some of the new solutions that we're bringing to market, right? I talked about early on synthetic identity, right? That type of fraud is one of the fastest growing types of fraud currently. It was like that before, right? And there's no set of fraud tag data set that claims that this is a synthetic identity. This has actually just increased or exponentially increased, right? Because as we think about how we've moved or accelerated our efforts to being more digital, right? Overnight, literally everyone had to become more digitally enabled, right? And provide, online mechanisms to interact. That type of fraud was existent before and it was growing fast. It's just doubling. It's like doubling down those fraudsters. So you think about the solutions that we're bringing to market, they were addressing those solutions now, and solutions like, Sure Profile addresses things like that now too, right? If anything, our clients should be embedding those into their ecosystem to really catch this type of fraud. It's ever so top of mind of all of the executives out there.
Right. No, it's good to see that a lot of the investments that you're making, and I think this is true for many companies also, is that they have lasting value. So it doesn't have to be looked at as something that is just to get through these times. So
right.
Great to hear. Just a reminder again to everyone, if you have questions, please post them. We'll get to them in about 15 minutes or so. Data privacy is another topic I'd like to get into. So, everyone's concerned about this. I know I've got teenage kids and I tell them to be super careful now when they give apps new permissions or asking for permissions for this and that all the time. And so now your offerings are in an interesting place at Experian, right? On the one hand, you could use more data about us as consumers to build better solutions that help consumers. On the other hand, we're all, like I just said, often very leery of giving up more control. And we've also got regulations like CCPA in California. So how do you strike a balance between these two, forces?
Yeah, great question. So, I'll caveat this with we're one of the most regulated credit bureaus kind of bodies that exists today, right? Everything it goes back to, the data that's used in a decision or a credit decision or, is displayable and disputable to the consumer, right? So the consumers absolutely have the right to come in and say, this is inaccurate information, this is incorrect. And then we work with, the lender that's provided the information to correct that piece of data that was used, right? And it's an unwavering commitment, right, to help consumers and clients, right? And we're actively always working with the regulators and lawmakers to understand and privacy implications and regulations from that front. But consumer permission data is one of those examples of how we're innovating with this in mind, right? Like going back to the example, of Boost, right? The ability to decide as a consumer when you want to contribute the data is really important, right? I can decide that I have, paid my utility or paid my Netflix bill, and I can decide when I want that contributed. And when I don't want to contribute, I can have it removed as well, right? And we're very clear in our terms and conditions of how that data is used and how it does benefit you, right? The other aspect of consumer permission is rent, right? Not everyone in this country has a home, right? But more than likely you are renting if you don't own. So you have a right to contribute that data, and it should help you, and it absolutely does help you, right? And that's kind of where we're really balancing, how we use personal data to help consumers in bigger ways, right? But keeping very much in mind that, the data that's used, again, is regulated, right? It is displayable, it's disputable, and consumers have a right to come dispute that information. So as a Boost consumer, right, you can pull your credit report and see what exactly was reported and, the decisions that are made off of it. That is really critical. And so it's transparent, it's empowering the consumer, but it's giving the right balance between, privacy and regulations and making sure that we're doing right for the consumers and as well as lenders.
No, I think that transparency is great. And then I think knowing that you're a regulated entity, I think helps us gain more trust. But the proof is often in the pudding. Like, do you have any sense of how much the uptake has been, in terms of people trusting you to give more data for a product like Boost?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we have over 5 million connected consumers, right, through Boost right now. About 2.5 million have seen their score improve with Experian Boost, right? And 61% of those have used, Boost itself, right? There's more than 29 million points that have been boosted to date, right? So we even see consumers that have shifted from poor to fair, right? Moving score bands, right? So consumers are seeing the positive impact that it makes. And that says a lot, right? And so you earn the trust of these consumers, and therefore, they are willing to contribute their data. And again, where the transparency is critical, but the empowerment is also just important.
Well, that's great. That's great to see that it's been very successful as a program. And now kind of an interesting question, if you're comfortable answering it. You obviously have a philosophy on how you want to be a trustworthy partner with our consumer data, right? And business data. Are there ideas that you've killed, product ideas that you've killed because you thought you couldn't honor that, that trust and commitment that you want to have?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Like, I think at the core of everything we do is we are the Consumers Bureau. We want to maintain us being the Consumers Bureau. And when you put that at the core of everything you kind of build around it, yeah, there's ideas, right? And any great product, innovation pipeline where you vet ideas, you kill ideas, there's going to be a few that you're going to kill, right? But if you keep front and center of what we're doing as a bureau and who we are, that's what changes it, right? So we know we want to drive inclusion, right? We know we want to drive diversity, right? And all of that, again, lends back to this fact that we're a very regulated bureau. We also can't do the wrong things because we have to make sure that these things are, the data assets and the analytics around it are being used in the right way, right? And we provide that right type of guidance out to our lenders as well. And so in working with a lot of our regulators, we have to comply with those data protection laws. I'm not exactly getting to your question, Manish, just because I can't share all my secrets of what we kill. But at the end of the day, there are a few things that we do kill, as any organization does, right? And as we think through, how we bring in different data assets and how they're used, it's really important, right? Because again, we are that trusted bureau, and at the core of everything we do is being the Consumers Bureau, and we want to be transparent and empower them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and it's good to know you continue to have that focus. So moving on to technology, can you give us some thoughts on the technology capabilities like machine learning and big data and maybe other things that you've leveraged to differentiate your offerings?
Right. So Ascend Technology Platform, cloud-based technology, right? That's kind of first and foremost, right? The buzzwords everyone's using, AI and ML, right? So as I think about some of the new solutions that are coming to market, Experian List comes immediately to mind, right? So List is a suite of family of scores, right? We call it List Premium, and it actually leverages all of our core credit data along with our alternative data, our rent bureau data. We have full file public record data. And what we've done there is that score is now giving us the ability to score an additional 40 to 50 million consumers. And the way we've done that is leveraging gradient boosting, right? So applying these new techniques and technologies to our traditional core data assets and all the other alternative data assets has given us this massive, significant lift, right? So it's a great example of how we're bringing all this together. The other thing, I referenced, synthetic identity fraud. Sure Profile is another great example of how we've leveraged, semi-supervised, supervised learning and identity graphs to really bring together our core credit data, but also look at the identity behaviors of a consumer, right? So we have a whole host of identity data assets that from data partners and data that's been contributed and collected over a period of time. What we do there is we look at the identity behaviors, identity establishments, the identity connections between those by, identity graphs, and looking at that learnings to say, the semi-supervised learnings to say, is this a real person or is this not a real person? So really harnessing kind of the capabilities and tools that we have in-house to draw the right products or bring the right products to the market so that, we can add value back to, our lenders and our consumers.
Oh, that's great to hear. Actually, I do see a lot of questions coming in from all of you. Thank you for that. We'll get to them in a moment. One last one from my end. So looking forward to 2021, Alpa, can you share with us some innovations or plans that you have from a data analytics perspective?
Yeah.
And yeah, no pressure, but some of your competitors might be hearing this too, so I guess you have to be careful.
Yeah, well, so happy to talk about some of the stuff that we're bringing to market. So I just touched on Experian Lift, right? So looking at all of our different data assets coming together to score the additional 40 to 50 million consumers, right? That is actually available now for client validations and will be in full production by early part of next year. We are very much focused on, and I kind of sound like a broken record here, but combating synthetic identity fraud, SureProfile, right? We now have the ability to predict whether a person is a synthetic identity or not, or in other words, is it a real person or not? And we're so confident behind our analysis and our model behind this that if it turns out to be a synthetic identity, we will actually cover your losses. That's a very bold statement to be made out in the industry, right? But that's how powerful our data and advanced analytics are, that we're willing to make a statement in that and really have skin in the game. Some of the other solutions that we just introduced that we're continuing to push on is around Ultra FICO. So a lot of momentum around, not just using your traditional credit data, but how do you bring in different cash flow or cash insights into those credit decisioning processes, right? So thinking about Ultra FICO, right? It's almost like a second chance, right? So many consumers may not meet the score cutoff or credit criteria of a lender, right? Embedding, allowing consumer permission data to access your DDA account allows us to analyze the cash flow within that DDA account, right? And that then builds into an Ultra FICO score, right? So giving you the confidence, right, or giving you that second chance to obtain that product that you're out there engaging with the lender with, right? And then, if I think about things around our platforms and Ascend, right, expanding on those platforms, right? We're talking about rapid model deployment and ML ops, right? All great things that are going to be capabilities that we provide our clients over the next year.
No, that's great to hear. And I think you touched on some cool things here where you're going from a model of just providing information and scores to even providing insurance that allows businesses to trust the data that you have, in a bigger way and get covered if there's a mistake. So it's amazing to see that. Great. So I think we're going to start jumping into the questions from the audience. Here's one. What are some of the challenges in cleansing data from alternative sources?
Yeah. So when I refer to alternative data, it's probably a lot of this is data furnished, right, from lenders, right? So when it comes to cleansing, it's like, matching back to the Experian PIN, right, and making sure that there's the right attributes, right? There's a lot of, let me go back it up. If I think about like things like SureProfile, a lot of the stuff what we do when we look at all the identity data that we have is basically a reconciliation, right? Like how often is that address popping up? What is the velocity of that address? How is it connected to 10 different potentially other addresses that were connected to someone else, right? So reconciling that, using the right techniques of the identity graph is really, really critical, right? And so that cleansing mechanism is important, right? Because again, if we go back to the SureProfile itself, without that, I can't confidently stand behind my product, right, and have skin in the game and say I'm going to cover your losses. So it is a challenge, right? But through great strides and massive improvements in technology that we've deployed internally, that we've been able to reconcile some things like that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Here's another question. How do you manage enhancement requests from customers? And I think this is a challenge that every one of us who builds products faces.
Yeah, so managing enhancement requests, I think, so we use, and I'm going to go kind of into kind of product management philosophy, if you don't mind for a second. I think we work with and we try to embed into all of our teams a product management lifecycle or philosophy, right? We want to make sure that the enhancements that are requested are not necessarily always one-offs, right? But they also can add value to other clients, right? Or value to what we're trying to bring to the market, right? I think you need to embed those practices into your organization, right? To truly vet, right? What enhancements are we willing to do? What enhancements where we may actually say no, like that's not the direction or that we're willing to head. It's a difficult balance, right? But once you install a framework that we can follow, we generally can vet those through different stages or different criteria that we establish to do that, right? Again, it's all about your project management lifecycle and philosophies and practices that you roll out internally.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Here's another question about investments in technology. So the question is, how have proactive investments in data engineering, big data and the like, and the cloud, how have those helped Experian navigate this pandemic, and how do you see the path forward?
Yeah, so great question. So I'd probably come back to, we have to continue to make investments, but like investments in like our Ascend technology platform is a great example, right? We started with a sandbox. We've expanded very quickly into Ascend intelligence services. We have data services, right? And those investments allow us, goes back to the question, Manish, you kind of asked us, is like, how do you segment for the different customers bases that we're looking for? Not every customer base wants maybe a hosted sandbox environment. Maybe they just want the data, right? But those investments that we've been making and will continue to make allow us to be flexible to address what the client's need is, right? In some situations, we can, build the model and deploy it, right, very quickly. Maybe they want to build a model. Maybe we're building new ML attributes, right? But those are all things that have to come together and have been a significant driver in kind of advancing, some of the key technologies that we're taking out to the market right now.
Yeah, and I believe you've been on that path for many years, because even in the time that you worked with Tavant, it's been there. So it's good to see the ongoing investment is paying off. A question about, I guess, AI and machine learning in particular. So the question is, what is the role played by AI and machine learning in new and updated products and solutions, and how are consumers and financial institutions benefiting from this?
Yeah, so the example that I used is, take Lyft, right? Because we use new gradient boosting techniques and brought together the new data assets, the benefit there is you're scoring an additional 40 to 50 million consumers. That's huge. Those are consumers that are traditionally maybe being what we call thin files, so consumers that have like less than 1 or 2 trade lines or accounts on their credit report, or credit invisibles, people that just don't even have a credit profile today, right? That is kind of how the consumer is benefiting, because now they can participate in the ecosystem, right? The lender can now see, who these consumers are and bring them and give them a product offering, right? That's how, the benefits that we're starting to see really play out, right? There's a lot of oversight, right? What we didn't touch on is probably, helping the regulators kind of get comfortable and the institutions work with the regulators get comfortable with these type of techniques, right? There's a lot of opportunity in that space. Obviously, the regulators move a little bit slower, right? A lot of these institutions move much faster, but that partnership can really help drive a lot more, because there is tremendous benefit, right? If you think about, again, how we're able to reconcile identities, right? I can tell you if it's a real person or not a real person, the synthetic identity. That's preventing fraud, right? For the lender itself. It's helping a consumer not have their identity stolen, right? Those are all benefits to consumers and to lenders, because then you're not, charging off a bunch of fraud losses, right? You're able to score more of the population. So tremendous benefits in leveraging AI and ML and new products and existing products as well too.
Yeah, and I think the potential going forward is pretty much unbounded. It's great to see that Experian's getting much more comfortable with actually deploying this into production. And I think you even have your own data labs team, if I'm not mistaken, which is really focused on such innovations, right?
Absolutely. Our data lab is front and center, right? Props to them, because a lot of these complex ML, AI, great products are coming because they are able to put the real brains behind it, right? We come up with these ideas and they can make it happen. So they're our instrumental part to bringing solutions to market here for us.
Great. Just one more question here. Let me read it for a second. Okay, what is your strategy towards employment and income verification and debt collection services? So very specific.
Yeah. So today I'll touch on this. We have verified income and employment. So it's through our partnership with Finicity. It is consumer consented, right? So you can go in and provide your consent to the DDA account and have a verification of income report or employment report and an asset report as well delivered back for a credit decision. There is a lot more on the horizon, stay tuned. But again, happy to share more offline on the current existing solutions that we do have in the marketplace today.
Great. Okay, so with that, I think we're done with the questions that came in through the Q&A panel. Alpa, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. And this concludes our webinar.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.